Tokyo, March 1942. The war had turned in Japan's favor. Singapore had fallen. The Philippines were collapsing. Every map in the Imperial General Headquarters glowed with red ink. Territories seized in a breathtaking span of 4 months. From Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, to the fall of Rangoon on March 8, 1942, Japan appeared unstoppable in Tokyo. Radio announcers declared a new order in Asia. The emperor's subjects bowed before shrines, believing the Pacific was now Japan's lake. American carriers many thought were crippled forever. The United States, one Japanese editorial wrote that spring no longer has the heart to fight. But across the Pacific, in secret briefings in Washington, something audacious was taking shape. An idea so impossible that even General Hap Arnold called it a one-way ticket to history. Soft fade to archival photos of early 1942 Washington, D.C. In early February 1942, Navy Captain Francis S. Lowe walked into Arnold's office with a proposal: launch U.S. Army bombers, not carrier planes, from an aircraft carrier. The goal was simple: strike the Japanese homeland, prove they were vulnerable, and restore American morale after Pearl Harbor. Lieutenant Colonel James Harold Doolittle, a 45-year-old test pilot, took command. "We'll take B-25 Mitchells," he told his men. "Strip them down and fly them off a carrier." The B-25B weighed over 15,000 pounds, twice the maximum safe load for carrier takeoffs. Yet on March 20, 1942, 16 aircraft were hoisted onto the deck of USS Hornet CV-8 at Alameda Naval Air Station, California. Each carried 2,000 pounds of bombs and a crew of 5. Visual cue: black and white footage of B-25s being craned aboard USS Hornet. As Hornet steamed west across the Pacific, Admiral William F. Halsey's Task Force 16 joined them with USS Enterprise. The combined fleet totaled 2 carriers, 4 cruisers, 8 destroyers, and 2 tankers. Only 16 ships standing between America and the Japanese homeland. Secrecy was absolute. The crews had no idea of their target until April 1st. "We're going to bomb Japan," Doolittle finally told them. Cheers erupted, followed by silence. They knew the math: with only enough fuel to reach China, there would be no return. At 0340 hours, April 18, 1942, a Japanese picket boat, Nido Maru, spotted the task force 650 miles east of Japan. The U.S. destroyer USS Nashville sank it, but not before it radioed Tokyo. The mission was compromised. Archival footage: destroyer gunners firing on small vessel. Halsey faced a brutal choice: either turn back or launch immediately, 200 miles farther than planned. The seas were rough. The carrier deck pitched violently. At 8:20 a.m., Doolittle's B-25 No. 1 roared down the 467-foot deck and lifted into gray mist. "I never expected to return," he later said. One by one, 15 more bombers followed, leaving the safety of the fleet behind. Below, Japanese fishermen stared skyward in disbelief. No one had imagined American bombers could reach their homeland. Visual cue: slow zoom on Doolittle's B-25 taking off from USS Hornet. At 12:15 p.m., Tokyo's air raid sirens wailed for the first time in the war. Witnesses described seeing silver-bellied planes glinting in the sun. Bombs fell on an oil tank farm, steel works, and military installations. The destruction was minor, fewer than 100 killed, but psychologically it was catastrophic. Prime Minister Tojo shouted, "How did they reach us?" General Homa, fighting in the Philippines, wrote, "Our pride is wounded. America has struck the sacred city." Across Japan, civilians fled to bomb shelters, clutching photos of the emperor. The myth of invulnerability shattered. Each B-25 continued west toward China, running low on fuel. Storms rolled over the coast. Doolittle ordered his crew to bail out over Jiangxi province. He landed in a rice field near Suzhou, barely missing a grove of trees. 4 airmen died, 8 were captured by the Japanese and later executed or imprisoned. Visual cue: parachutes descending into dark clouds. The raid destroyed little but changed everything. Tokyo's high command drew a single conclusion: Japan must eliminate the U.S. carriers that launched the attack. That decision led directly to the Battle of Midway 6 weeks later, June 4th to 7th, 1942, the turning point of the Pacific War. In a single daring strike, 16 planes rewrote strategy. The Japanese people learned that distance no longer meant safety, and the Americans learned that courage could be its own weapon. Doolittle returned home believing the mission had failed. Instead, President Roosevelt awarded him the Medal of Honor. "You have made America believe again," the president told him on May 19, 1942. From that day, Tokyo prepared for a battle it could never win, and America began a march that would not stop until 1945. The Doolittle raiders were gone, but their impact hit Japan like a fault line snapping beneath a city. Tokyo newspapers printed headlines in bold black ink: "Enemy bombers over the sacred capital." For the first time in 2,600 years, the Japanese homeland had been attacked. The shock was not military. It was psychological. Japan had promised its people, "The war will never reach our shores." Now that promise lay smoldering among shards of factory glass. Clapperboard show smoke rising over Tokyo industrial sites. The search for someone to blame. On April 19, 1942, just one day after the raid, Prime Minister Tojo called an emergency meeting inside the Imperial General Headquarters. Voices rose. Fingers pointed. How could American bombers fly over our capital unchallenged? Admiral Nagumo, commander of the Pearl Harbor Fleet, kept his calm. "We underestimated the enemy," he admitted, "but someone had to pay." Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, closed his eyes in silence. He understood instantly what this meant. Japan must destroy America's aircraft carriers, or Japan would lose the war. And soon. Clapperboard, cut to footage of Japanese admirals around a large map. Revenge orders. Brutal and immediate. The first victims weren't Americans. They were Chinese. Civilians. Because the Doolittle crews crash-landed in Japanese-occupied territory, the Empire launched a campaign of terror across Zhejiang and Jiangxi provinces. From May to November 1942, the Japanese army executed over 10,000 civilians, spread cholera and plague bacteria, burned entire villages to the ground. Historians call it the Zhejiang-Jiangxi campaign. Few in the West ever learned of it, but China never forgot. Clapperboard showed devastated Chinese villages, archival photos, the carrier crisis. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, reports arrived daily. The U.S. had 3 surviving carriers in the Pacific: White Heavy checkmark USS Enterprise, White Heavy checkmark USS Hornet, White Heavy checkmark USS Yorktown. Yamamoto feared them like a hunter fears a hidden rifle. He had to lure them into a trap. He pointed to a small American base, Midway Atoll, a dot of coral and sand in the vast Pacific. "Capture Midway," he said, "and the last American carriers will come to stop us." The plan was ruthless, arrogant, and, for a moment, brilliant. Clapperboard map animation zooms from Japan to Midway Atoll, the American perspective. Hope reborn in Washington, D.C. Everything changed overnight. President Roosevelt stepped before microphones on April 19. "We will fight until we achieve victory. We have struck Japan, and this is only the beginning." For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Americans believed him. Factories thundered. Recruiting stations overflowed. Flags appeared in every window. A single raid, just 16 bombers, had restarted America's heartbeat. Clapperboard, archival footage of U.S. workers welding tanks and bombers. The Japanese gamble everything. Yamamoto now prepared the largest fleet Japan would ever send to war. 4 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships, 15 cruisers, 42 destroyers, 248 carrier-based aircraft, 16 seaplanes, 5,000 plus elite naval personnel. He believed this force was unstoppable. But he didn't know American codebreakers in Hawaii had already cracked Japan's naval cipher. Jan 25. Commander Joseph Rockefort sent a secret message to Admiral Nimitz at Pearl Harbor. They are coming to Midway. Clapperboard, cut to classified documents and cryptographers working. The trap is set by the end of May 1942. Carriers were waiting near Midway. Marines fortified the beaches. Aircrews prepared to defend the island to the last man. Japan thought it was hunting. But the hunter was being hunted. All because Tokyo was humiliated because America showed it could strike back. Clapperboard, carrier deck crews readying aircraft, slow motion. Doolittle's unintended masterpiece. General Doolittle didn't know any of this, that he expected to be court-martialed for losing every bomber. Instead, he was celebrated as a hero. He wrote in his diary, "A little damage to Japan, a big lift for America." Years later, U.S. Navy historians said, Doolittle's raid did not win the war, but it changed the direction of it. The Japanese Empire stood at the edge of overconfidence, ready to make the most disastrous decision in its history. War makes time slow and fast. At the same moment, June 4, 1942, just 6 weeks after the Doolittle raid. The sky above Midway was the color of cold steel. The ocean below looked too calm for what was coming. Clapperboard, wide aerial shot of Midway Atoll, quiet ocean before the storm. Enemy aircraft approaching. At 4:30 a.m., U.S. Navy radar on Sand Island picked up incoming dots. Dozens, then more. Commander Logan Ramsey sent out the message, "Air raid Midway, this is no drill." Marine pilots sprinted to their Wildcats and Buffaloes. They didn't know exactly who they were fighting, but they knew it was the same force that had brought America to its knees at Pearl Harbor. Clapperboard, scramble footage. Pilots running, engines roaring to life. The first class Japanese carrier aircraft, 108 bombers and fighters, came screaming in from the northwest. 6M0D3 Evals B5N. Kates, they dove through anti-aircraft fire as black bursts dotted the sky. Bombs struck the runway, fuel tanks, hangars. The ground shook. Dust and smoke filled the air. Marines fought back with outdated fighters, too slow, too fragile. But they fought anyway. 40% of Midway's defenders died in the first attack. Clapperboard, archival gun camera shots plus explosions on Midway. The decision that saved the world. Aboard the carrier Akagi, Admiral Nagumo faced a choice. 1. Launch the second strike immediately, or 2. Rearm aircraft to hit the unexpected American fleet. He hesitated and ordered rearming. Bombs off, torpedoes on. Armorers rushed. Fuel hoses dripped gasoline across wooden decks. Planes crowded below deck like bombs waiting to ignite. Clapperboard, tight shots of bombs being moved, sweating deck crew. The sacrifice mission. Meanwhile, U.S. torpedo squadrons launched from USS Hornet and USS Enterprise. Torpedo Squadron 8, 15 planes. No fighter escort. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron said only, "Follow me." They flew low, slow, into hell. Japanese Zeros ripped them apart. One after another. They fell burning into the sea. Out of 30 torpedo planes that attacked, white heavy check mark, only 1 survived. Pensive-faced 60 young men died in minutes. Clapperboard, show VT-8 memorial photo, slow respectful music. Their sacrifice bought 4 minutes. 4 minutes that changed history. The dive bombers arrive at 10:22 a.m. SBD Dauntless dive bombers from USS Enterprise appeared high above the Japanese carriers. Unseen, untouched. The decks below were still covered in fuel, bombs, and fully fueled planes. Lieutenant Commander Clarence McCluskey pointed down. There's the whole damn Jap fleet. The Dauntless tipped forward and dove. Sirens howling. Clapperboard used classic steep dive footage. Cockpits shaking. Within seconds. Fire Akagi hit Fire Kaga hit Fire Soryu hit Inferno. Planes exploded before pilots could climb into them. Fuel turned to firestorms that raced across decks. Thousands of men were burned alive. The pride of the Imperial Navy was drowning in flames. Desperation and fury. Admiral Yamamoto refused to believe what was happening. How many carriers remain? 2? 1. Silence. Point 1 carrier left. Hiryu. She launched all remaining aircraft. Desperate counterstrikes. They found U.S. carrier USS Yorktown. Bombs smashed her deck. Torpedoes tore open her hull. Yorktown listed hard, but still refused to die. Clapperboard, explosions ripping across Yorktown's deck. The final blow before Hiryu could reload. More Dauntless appeared over the horizon. They dove with precision. Explosion after explosion. Fire reached the sea itself. Hiryu's flag came down. The last of the Pearl Harbor strike. Force gone. Clapperboard, ship burning, heavy black smoke rising. The Empire wounded by sunset on June 4th. Japan had lost. 4 carriers, 248 aircraft, 3,057 elite naval crewmen, most irreplaceable. Japan's best pilots, the core of its naval air power. The United States lost. 1 carrier, Yorktown, 307 Mina, devastating victory. A turning point written in fire and blood. What Doolittle truly achieved? None of this. Not a single dive bomber would have been there if 16 battered B-25s hadn't appeared over Tokyo. What looked like a small pinprick had been a dagger pushed into the heart of Japan's war plans. Historian John Lundstrom later wrote, Doolittle forced Japan to act, and in acting, Japan doomed itself. Clapperboard, fade to black with audio of engines fading. Dignity amid ruin in Tokyo that night. The Emperor's palace remained standing. But the spell of invincibility was shattered. Nurses cleaned broken glass from hospital floors. Parents knelt beside bomb-shaken children. Old men stared at the horizon, wondering, what have we awakened? The war that Japan thought it controlled was suddenly controlling Japan. Clapperboard, quiet footage of Tokyo civilians searching ruins for belongings. The Doolittle raiders had done the impossible. But the war was far from over. Japan would strike back with vengeance sharper than ever before. And in that vengeance, the empire would carve its own downfall. War is not just fought on maps. It is fought in the mud, in the heat, in the dark, inside the human mind. After Midway, Japan still held vast territories. Burma, Malaya, Borneo, the Philippines, and a chain of islands stretching across the Pacific like stepping stones of fire. We Marines were sent to snatch those stones back, one by one. Clapperboard, island coastline, palm trees swaying, deep contrast between beauty and war. Guadalcanal. August 1942, the jungle swallowed sound. It swallowed light. It tried to swallow us. We were ordered to defend Henderson Field, the only airfield on the island. At night, the Japanese attacked like ghosts. No warning, no footsteps, just screams and steel. They called it bonsai. We called it terror. Clapperboard, silhouettes rushing through jungle plus sudden muzzle flashes. 2 worlds, 2 ideas of honor we learned quickly. Japanese soldiers believed surrender was worse than death to them. Death meant honor. Capture meant shame. That we tried to save wounded enemy soldiers. They used their last breath to detonate grenades. It wasn't madness. It was doctrine. It was the Bushido Code. Ancient loyalty reborn in the age of machines. But courage alone can't stop. Bullets. The first Hago we ever saw, we were digging new trenches near the Matanico River. Suddenly, clanking metal. A shape pushing through the palms. A tank, small, almost fragile, looking at it, had a tiny turret, thin armor plates. The sun glinted off bolts like it was a kid's toy. One Marine laughed. "Hey boys, the circus brought a clown car." But that laugh died when its 37mm gun spat fire. Clapperboard, show type 95 Hago emerging from jungle brush. Try the 50. Our .30 calories hit the tank. Sparks. Nothing more. Sparks don't stop steel. But Gunnery Sergeant Walker ran to the Browning M2. The mighty .50 caliber, he loaded a fresh belt, took aim, and let the beast roar. The bullets punched through the tank like it was made of tin. Fuel ignited. Flames erupted out the hatch. We wiped sweat off our faces, eyes wide. "You've got to be kidding me." Clapperboard, gun camera style shot. .50 cal bullets tearing armor. A design from the wrong war later. We found out why. Armor. 12mm max. Less than some Marines' helmets. Thin aluminum fuel tanks, cramped turret. Only one man inside, no radios. Flags for communication. Japan built the Hago for fast campaigns in China, not for slugging it out with Marines. Their engineers believed speed equals survival, but on Guadalcanal, speed meant nothing. Here, the jungle ate speed for breakfast. The pilot's horror inside that melted tank. We found something I'll never forget. A photograph. A young wife and a baby. The picture edges were scorched, but their smiles survived. I stared at it longer than I should have. His war ended in seconds, hours, would keep going. Clapperboard, close shot of burned photograph beside tank wreck. Tokyo rose and broken promises each night. Japanese propaganda crackled over radios. "You Marines are trapped. You will starve. Your ships are at the bottom of the sea." But our planes, Wildcats, dauntless, kept landing. Henderson Field still belonged to us. Every bomb dropped on that strip reminded Japan. They weren't unstoppable anymore. The jungle remembers rain came like punishment. Uniforms never dried. Corpses didn't get burials. The jungle devoured them. We found empty Hago hulls rusting, half buried in vines. Abandoned. Forgotten. As if the jungle was reclaiming Japan's pride. Clapperboard, drone-like shot of jungle swallowing wrecked tanks. But the Empire would not yield. The Emperor's men still charged with bayonets. They still died with the samurai spirit. We respected their courage. We feared their conviction. But conviction can't stop artillery, and for every soldier Japan lost, Americans built 10 replacements. Japan didn't just lose battles. It lost time. A war Japan couldn't win. By the end of 1942, Japan lost 25,000 men on Guadalcanal. Most elite infantry units, nearly all local air power. United States America gained the initiative, a foothold on the road to Tokyo. Proof that courage alone couldn't defeat industry. Japan still had vast territory, still had strong fleets, still had fanatical devotion. But their tanks, their strategy, belonged to yesterday. We would meet more Hagos on Tarawa, on Saipan, on Peleliu, and each time, it would be the same .1 bullet, .1 flash, .1 dead crew. The Hago became a symbol not of power, of tragedy. The bravery of the men inside deserved better than the steel that failed them. We Marines didn't cheer. We didn't celebrate. We simply moved on, boots sinking into the mud, whispering to ourselves, "If this is victory, why does it feel like loss?" Clapperboard, fade to black, distant thunder rumbling. Guadalcanal broke the illusion of Japanese superiority. The war had changed, Japan had not, and soon, another island would test both nations like never before. We heard rumors before we left. Whispers from the Navy men. Tarawa will be hell. They were wrong. Hell would have been kinder. Clapperboard, slow reveal of Bidio Island. Small, flat, covered in bunkers. November 20th, 1943. Bidio Island, Tarawa Atoll. 4,500 Japanese defenders commanded by Admiral Keiji Shibasaki. He boasted, "A million men could not take Tarawa in 100 years. We Marines planned to do it in 3 days." But war does not respect plans. The lagoon betrayed us. We hit the water at dawn. The sun rose like fire behind us. Landing craft roared forward, but the tide was wrong. The reef blocked our boats. We had to jump out. 600 yards from shore. Chest-deep water. Machine guns waiting. The Japanese watched us in the surf like sharks. They opened fire. Clapperboard, depict Marines falling in the water. Splashes turning dark. The longest walk of my life. Bullets snapped like angry bees. Men sank without screams. Just bubbles. Gear dragged us down. Rifles, helmets, ammunition. All became anchors. For every step forward 2 Marines went under. We pushed bodies. Acidito, keep moving. When I looked down, I saw the ocean turning red. Concrete and steel. The devil's fortress. When we reached sand, we crawled into hell. Tarawa was not a beach. It was a fortress. 500 reinforced bunkers, 8-inch naval guns mounted like dragons, heavy machine guns in steel pillboxes, snipers hidden in palm trunks, mines buried everywhere. It felt like the island itself wanted to kill us. Clapperboard, camera sweeping along bunker line, muzzle flashes erupting. The first Hago. Up close just before noon, we heard tracks grinding. A Hago tank burst from behind a seawall. Its machine guns stitched fire across the beach. We were pinned. Sergeant Ramirez yelled, "Get the bazooka!" But the bazooka team was gone, swallowed by the waves. We had one choice. Grenades and guts. We let the tank pass. 2 Marines leapt onto the back. Yanking the hatch open, grenades rolled inside. The explosion lifted the turret like a lid on a boiling pot. For a moment, silence. Then fire roared out of every seam. No cheering, no victory cries, just breathing heavy. Guilty. Clapperboard, show turret flying upward, smoke silhouetting falling Marines. Courage buried in sand. We kept advancing yard by yard, sometimes inch by inch. The sun baked us. The flies bit us. The screams haunted us. We prayed for night. Night didn't save us. It just hid the misery. We listened to the wounded calling for corpsmen. We listened to silence replacing their voices. We wondered if it would be our turn next. Japan's armor versus America's firepower. We learned from every ruined Hago. Specification type: 95 Hago U.S. Sherman armor, 6 to 12 mm, 50 to 75 mm gun, 37 mm, 75 mm crew, 3 men, 5 men. Radio rare. Standard result: burned, survived. Japan's courage was unmatched. Japan's tanks were out of time. Pillboxes. The real enemy tanks were scary, but pillboxes were worse. Inside each 3, 8 men, machine guns covering every angle, steel doors, smoke grenades, useless flamethrowers. The only answer: we burned them out. We heard screams we still hear today. Clapperboard, close shot. Flamethrower stream entering pillbox slit. Admiral Shibasaki was half right. The Japanese fought until nothing remained, and they nearly stopped us. But something kept us moving. Not rage. Not glory. Duty. Someone had to take this island, or thousands more would die later. After 76 hours, it was over. Be the end. Tarawa was quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled of burnt flesh. Cortetez, sea and death. We looked around. Nothing alive. Nothing whole. The butcher's bill: United States Marine Corps. 1,009 killed, 2,101 wounded. Japanese defenders. 4, 500 killed, 17 captured. Alive 17. The others died in bunkers, on the sand, or by their own hand. Honor through death. Clapperboard, drone-like shot pulling away. Island covered in wreckage and graves. I didn't feel like a hero. People think war is like the movies. Flags waving, music swelling, heroes smiling. But Tarawa taught us the truth. Victory is surviving one more second than the men trying to kill you. That we didn't win, that we endured. And tomorrow we'd be sent to do it all again. Guadalcanal cracked Japan's confidence. Tarawa shattered it. But Japan still had islands, still had soldiers, still had faith. And soon we would land on Saipan, where their tanks, their pride, and their families would stand between us and the sea. Night on Saipan was worse than day in daylight. You could see the men trying to kill you. At night. You could only hear them breathing. Clapperboard, night battlefield, silhouettes behind palm trees, June 15th, 1944. Saipan, Mariana Islands population before invasion. 29,000 civilians Japanese garrison. 32,000 troops U. Marines and Army. 71,000 landing force. Saipan wasn't just another atoll. It was the doorstep to Japan. Take Saipan and B-29 bombers could reach Tokyo. The Japanese knew that. They would not surrender this island. Not ever. They have tanks. The first time we saw Hagos on Saipan, they weren't alone. This wasn't a few tanks supporting infantry. It was a full armored counterattack. June 16 to 17, 1944, the Japanese launched their greatest tank charge in the Pacific. 44 tanks of the 9th Armored Regiment moving across the darkness straight into our lines. The ground shook like thunder. We felt death coming on treads. Clapperboard, show 44 Hagos moving under moonlight, eerie, determined. The most terrifying kind of battle. You hear them before you see them. The squeal of metal tracks crept closer, closer, closer. Then, gunfire erupted. Tracer lines cut across the night. Explosions lit palm trees like torches. Marines screamed for bazookas, shouted fire control orders. Nobody really controlled anything. It was chaos. The Hagos' only strength, surprise. In the dark, the thin armor didn't matter. What mattered was fear. One Marine yelled, "They're inside our perimeter." And he was right. A Hago broke through the line, ran right over a machine gun nest, crushed the men inside before they could reload. We fired point blank at its side. Our .50 cal store threw it like wet paper. The tank burst into flames. Men inside pounded on the Hachases. Fire consumed them. A nightmare I still see when I close my eyes. Clapperboard, show Hago glowing orange from inside. Hatch banging, then silence. Courage versus steel. The next tank came faster. Charging like a bull. I dove into a shell crater and blind fired upward as it rolled over me. I heard the crew shouting Japanese commands through the thin armor. I pulled a grenade, yanked the pin with my teeth, and prayed. When the tank passed, I threw it onto the engine and ran until I tasted blood in my throat. The explosion flipped the turret, smoke poured out. But more tanks kept coming. A sky full of fire flares lit the world white. For a moment night became day. We saw how many tanks still advanced. Too many. Shermans roared in from the flank. Finally, something bigger than them. The Marines cheered like madmen. The Shermans fired .175mm shell hit a Hago dead center, split it open like a tin can. Another fired, clean through 2 tanks in a row. Japanese armor doctrine died on that beach. The charge fails. By dawn, the beach was covered in steel coffins. All 44 Hagos were destroyed. Every last one. Burning, twisted, silent. More than 300 Japanese tankers died inside them. The counterattack was over. But the war on Saipan was not. Clapperboard, aerial shot of smoking. Tank wrecks at sunrise, the enemy we hated to fight. Because they wouldn't stop fighting, Japanese soldiers did not retreat, did not surrender, did not accept defeat. When their tanks burned, they fought on foot. When their weapons ran dry, they fought with grenades. When grenades were gone, they charged with bayonets. When wounded, they crawled forward. And when surrounded, they chose death before capture. Honor taken to its most terrible extreme. Civilians in the crossfire. Saipan broke my heart more than Tarawa. Families were here. Women, children, terrified. Propaganda told them Americans would torture them, kill them, so they hid. They starved. They jumped from cliffs believing death was safer than rescue. We tried to save them. We couldn't save enough. Clapperboard, cliff edge at Marpy Point. Civilians surrounded, fear everywhere. The island that broke Japan by July 9, 1944. The island fell. The cost. United States U.S. casualties. 3. 426 killed, 13. 099 wounded. Japan Japanese casualties. 27. 000 plus killed, 921 captured. The Emperor of Japan was told, Saipan has fallen. The truth hit Tokyo like a bomb. For the first time, Japan knew the war could be lost. The hardest part of survival after Saipan didn't celebrate. We buried friends, we cleaned weapons, we waited for orders. Because victory didn't feel like triumph, that it felt like we get to keep fighting. They don't. And that 'tis the most painful honor of all. That we sailed away watching the island shrink behind us. Ahead was Tinian, Guam, Peleliu, and later Okinawa. Each one worse than the last. The Hago would appear again. But never again. As a threat. Only as a reminder. War kills armies. War kills nations. And sometimes it kills the men who survive it. By late 1944, we had learned one terrible truth. Japan's tanks were never meant to survive. Clapperboard, slow pan across burned-out Hago hulls, twisted steel silence. If we die together. Many Japanese tankers believed this. They had no illusions. They knew their armor was thin. They knew a single .50 cal round could turn a fuel tank into a funeral pyre. Yet they climbed in every mission, every order, every hopeless charge. Honor over survival. Duty over life. That I respected them for that. Even as we destroyed them. Leyte, the Broken Steel Army. October, December 1944. Leyte, Philippines. Japan sent armor that didn't belong in 1944. Type 95 Hago, Type 97 Chiha, even old tankettes with 7mm guns. They fought U.S. tanks designed a decade ahead of them. That it wasn't a battle, that it was slaughter. Clapperboard, show Shermans firing through villages, Japanese tanks crumpling. One night on Leyte, a Hago emerged from the jungle like a ghost from an older war. That it fired. The small cannon pop felt like a toy against our steel giant. The shell bounced off. Our Sherman answered with a single shot. Armor pierced, fuel ignited. Men inside died screaming. The fight lasted maybe 10 seconds. But those screams have lasted a lifetime. Courage. Without a chance, we interrogated a captured tanker. He was only 19. He told us their doctrine plainly. Our tanks are not designed to fight your tanks. We support infantry. We die willingly if it helps the Emperor. Imagine learning your enemy doesn't expect to live. They're victorious, simply killing you too. How do you fight someone who has already accepted death? The Emperor's last order. Attack. Don't return. To BY 1945, Japan's tank forces were desperate. Fuel shortages and no spare parts. Crews half-trained. Armor thinner than luck. Yet their orders never changed. Charge, fight, do not retreat. They followed those orders even when logic was long dead. Okinawa, the tank graveyard. April-June 1945. Okinawa, Japan. The final armored battles of the war. Japan hid tanks in caves, tunnels, dug-in hulls turned into armored bunkers. Hagos fired from walls of stone, emerging just long and auto-shoot, then disappear underground. But when they tried to move, Shermans caught them with terrifying ease. Clapperboard, show collapsed cave bunker. Shattered Hago turret. A final charge. No survivors on May 4th, 1945. A last chance. Armored attack began. Hagos and Chihas rumbled across open fields toward U.S. artillery. Brave men in fragile machines. The result. All tanks destroyed, most crews killed. Zero effect on American advance. One Marine near me said quietly, "They're charging to die." And he was right. The day I looked inside a Hago Okinawa, late May, we found a Hago knocked out beside a cliff road. The hatch was open. Smoke still curled from it like breath from a dying animal. Inside, 3 men lay burned together, hands melted to controls. Helmet straps fused to bone. That I looked away, because I saw myself in that steel tomb. Different uniform, different flag, same fear, same youth, same hopedo, see home again. Clapperboard, close shot, Marines stepping away, helmet lowered, the last radio message Japanese. Transmissions recorded. Our tanks are destroyed. The Americans keep coming. We cannot stop them. We will attack again. It was the voice of a soldier who knew the truth. Japan had already lost, but honor demanded they keep dying. When the guns finally fell silent June 22, 1945, Okinawa ended. Japan's armored corps was effectively gone. Destroyed not because they were cowards, but because they were abandoned by leadership that valued glory over survival. We recovered dog tags from burned tanks. Names that would never be spoken at Japanese dinner tables again. I kept one tag from a tanker who looked my age. I still have it. I still wonder who waited for him, who never heard the truth of how he died. Reflection. People think Marines laughed at the Hago. Maybe once. But by 1945 there was no laughter left. Only respect for men who deserved better armor, better strategy, better leaders, better futures. A tank should protect its crew. The Hagawa's a coffin painted green. The war moves on. We left Okinawa knowing the invasion of Japan was next. We expect a bloodbath beyond imagination. Millions of Japanese civilians, hundreds of thousands of U.S. casualties, every last tank fighting to the end. We did not know that 2 bombs would end the war instead. Or how much that would change everything. Because peace sometimes comes with its own ghosts. When Okinawa ended on June 22, 1945, Japan's tank force was gone and everything but name. Hagos rusted in shattered caves. Chias lay cracked and burned beside rice fields. Tankers' helmets melted into steel. The empire had no more armor to protect the men who still believed in it. Clapperboard, camera moves slowly across rows of wrecked tanks. A war without a future. By July 1945, Japan had no oil, no steel, no factories producing tanks, no transport ships to move them, no hope left. Still, Imperial High Command ordered more. Prepare tanks for homeland defense. How do you defend a homeland with machines that burst into flames from a single American bullet? The last Hagos, they dug the tanks into beaches, buried them with only turrets showing, trying to turn coffins into bunker teeth. Young tankers waited underground in darkness, engine off, no escape hatch left open. They whispered to each other about death like an old friend who hadn't arrived yet but would soon. Clapperboard, dark tunnel shot, match flame illuminating a soldier's eyes. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August 6 and 9, 1945. The world changed in 2 blinding flashes. Nothing any tanker could fight against. After Nagasaki, a Hago crewman wrote, "Our tanks were useless. Our courage was useless. Even the sky turned against us." Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. The tanks never fired their final shots. The men inside never got their glorious death. Only silence. Occupation. Tanks with no purpose. When the Americans arrived, we found hundreds of Hagos. Some abandoned on rail cars, some hidden in barns, some still manned by soldiers too ashamed to leave. We inspected them with engineers and notebooks. The verdict was always the same: too thin, too small, too late. One Marine said quietly, "Bravery like that should have been given armor." There was no pride in what we saw, only sorrow. The tanker I never forgot. During disarmament, a Japanese officer approached me. His uniform was clean, his salute perfect, but his hands shook. He said, "Our tanks failed us. My men deserved better." I told them we fought for honor, but I think we just died. Then he bowed, not to the flag, but to me. To a fellow soldier who survived what his men did not. Clapperboard, close up, 2 soldiers standing together, war behind them. The ghost in my memory. Years later, back home, I married, had child. Rena life Japan's tank crews never saw. But every now and then at 4 in the morning, when the house is silent, I wake up smelling diesel and burned steel. I close my eyes and I see him, a Japanese tanker, the same age I was. Fear behind determined eyes, waiting for a death never asked for. He is My reminder that in war enemy soldiers are not villains. They are mirrors. What history should remember? People joke about the Hago. They point at its thin armor, its outdated gun, its one-man turret, its fuel tanks that exploded like gasoline bombs. But those criticisms miss the truth. The Hago didn't fail. The country that built it did. Its crews weren't fools. They were heroes forced to fight with tools that belonged to the last war, not the one they were dying in. They deserved armor worthy of their courage. Final lesson: war is a contest not just of strength but of industry and respect for life. Japan lost because it could not protect the brave souls inside its machines. So when people ask me today, who were the better soldiers, the Marinese or the Japanese tankers? I say, the ones who didn't come home, because they paid more than anyone. Closing thoughts for the audience: if you ever see a burned Japanese tank in a museum or in the jungle, don't laugh. Touch the steel. Feel the heat that once lived inside. Remember the young men who were told, "Die for your emperor," and did so with a bravery this world may never see again. We survived because they burned. We advanced because they were left behind. We lived because they were sacrificed. And that truth will haunt me until my last breath. Clapperboard, fade to black. Faint rumble of an engine that never starts again.